Yes. Yeah, well. That's why we don't have breaks? Actually, it was. Give it a couple more minutes. But let's see. Mayors, let me introduce someone that I've had, as I mentioned. Let me introduce somebody, as I mentioned, I have a great deal of respect for. Worked with him more indirectly than directly, but with Gray Davis, Governor of California, while I was Speaker of the Assembly. Watched him. He may know he was the pollster and one of the key strategists in Howard Dean's run for president, opening up new venues for grassroots organizing and fundraising, which actually laid the basis for what President Obama was able to do. He's advised Mayors Bill White of Houston, Tom Menino of Boston, and Tom Barrett of Milwaukee. And I asked Paul to come here to discuss what he's seen from the American public on the response to the debt debate, and how we can best position the Conference of Mayors to move forward on an investment agenda. I mean, I think John really laid this out fairly well. You know, the difference between mayors and the legislators, particularly in the bubble of the Beltway, is that we actually have to balance budgets. We have to focus on jobs and job creation, and we need to interject and insert ourselves in this debate. So with that, I'd like to ask Paul to make a presentation. What we're going to do is, I told him, we want to hear as much as we can from you, so be very, you know, don't cut short. I told him his presentation. And then, as we did in the last opportunity, we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. But I am going to ask all of you, and I didn't ask any questions, if you noticed, because I want to hear from, we want to entertain your questions. I want you to ask questions as much as possible. I want to be as concise as possible so I can hear, we can get as many of your questions as we can. And so with that, Paul?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for those kind words. By the way, did any of you get the feeling that we could, if we could swap out Roger Goodell, DeMaurice Smith, and Jerry Jones for Barack Obama, John Boehner, and Mitch McConnell, that we'd solve every problem? I mean, I turn on the news, and I don't know if I'm watching CNN or ESPN, or essentially there's alternative universes. The only difference is the NFL has money and the U.S. doesn't. Which tells us something. As Mayor Villagrosa mentioned, our firm has largely been based here in California, and I was in California for the whole period of those Davis years, which ended, unfortunately. We're still reminded of. But these days I hide out in Madison, Wisconsin some, the center of the political universe, Madison, Wisconsin. And my mayor is here, and I just want to illustrate something. 3 months ago, he wasn't my mayor, and in fact, I worked for the incumbent, and I lost. It was a good race. But I want to illustrate a point I'm going to make about you all by using Madison, Wisconsin as an example. Now remember, we had a mayoral race in the midst of this huge economic recession, near depression that we're all suffering from, in the aftermath of an election in November that was pretty devastating to one party and successful to the other, but obviously produced a huge change, including in Wisconsin, where the Republicans won essentially everything in November. And then, in the middle of this enormous political cataclysm that occurred when our governor decided to go after collective bargaining of unions, and we had a 2 or 3 month period that was just unheard of, unpredictable, unprecedented. In the midst of this, we had a mayor's race. And the fascinating thing about the mayor's race, as the people were marching around the Capitol, occupying the Capitol, Democratic senators leaving the state, all that stuff you saw in the news, the public in Madison, Wisconsin, over 60% of them said their city was headed in the right direction. 2/3 of them had a favorable attitude about the incumbent mayor, approved of his job performance, and ended up voting for his opponent, who was actually even slightly better liked than he was. Essentially, they liked everybody in the race, and Paul Soglin won by a little less than 1,000 votes, but he won, ran a good campaign. But the amazing thing was, these two people essentially had been mayors of Madison, Wisconsin for nearly 20 of the previous 24 years. In this period of deep frustration with all things political and this belief that government doesn't work anymore, where incumbency seems to be not a badge of honor, but sort of a black mark against you. In Madison, Wisconsin, people basically said, I like one alternative, I like the other alternative, we'll go ahead and choose, life goes on. And they went with Paul Soglin. But it's, to me, an illustration of essentially what's different. And Mayor Villagrosa was already making a reference to it, as John Podesta did. Cities still, by and large, work. Dysfunction nationally, function locally. Voters still have confidence in you all. I titled this The Last Remaining Redoubt of Political Confidence. And Redoubt is sort of a military, it's a bastion in the midst of what is clearly very tumultuous times. People still, by and large, think that their cities, their mayors, are actually doing a pretty good job. They still have confidence that they lack in almost every other area. And to illustrate that, the most recent numbers that I took a look at in the last 24 to 36 hours, they're ever changing, nationally, right direction, wrong track numbers are about 29% right direction. There are some states that are lower than that. Nevada, I mean, as an example. And not a whole lot that are much better. The president has a 46% job approval rating. It briefly went back up above 50 in the wake of the killing of Osama bin Laden. It's back down now into kind of the mid to high 40s. Congress's rating is a booming 19% approval rating right now. We did in the last couple of months a national survey when we asked people about certain institutions. We said, compare them to 10 or 15 years ago. Have you gained or lost confidence in them? And they included Congress, government in general, politicians in Washington, big corporations, et cetera. The only institution where people actually felt more confident about was the military. All the others, a majority, and in most cases a large majority, felt less confidence, less trust in those institutions than they did. Now, we didn't say local government, but I can tell you that including several cities of mayors that are in this room, I was just looking at polls that we've done, a couple others I've had access to, in about a dozen big cities over the course, mostly in the last several months, the last year, but certainly since the real recession hit. And I just looked at and did an average of the right direction in mayoral job approval numbers. Nationally, we have 29% right direction, 46% presidential approval, 19% Congress. The city councils aren't that low. You guys would probably like it to be, not quite that low. But the mayoral ratings are as follows. The right direction, wrong track average number for those dozen or so cities that I looked at was 47%. And the job approval, interestingly, Obama's is 17 points higher than right direction. Well, that was the average mayoral approval as well, 64%. 64%. About 17 points higher than the right direction. Now, some of the most recent cities have dipped a little bit, understandably. The pressure is growing. But by and large, you have a majority or a near majority in most American cities who either feel their city is okay, or it's going to be better in the future, or they like the job the mayor is doing, they have confidence in it. It's so different than what you see at a national level, where the public essentially has thrown up their hands. You know, part of that last discussion, a lot of it is politics. I mean, public made a vote for change. They were frustrated for a variety of reasons. They voted for change. They don't particularly like the change they see right now. The change may have been misinterpreted. That's happened on both sides before. But it's dysfunctional. They don't have a whole lot of faith in D.C. They don't have a whole lot of faith in Congress. Their confidence in the president has waned. We'll see. We'll have a test next year. But at the local level, they're still extremely positive. We ask specific job ratings of mayors. And by the way, what we find in terms of the most important problems, yes, jobs in the economy are front and center. But as you know, everybody can attest to, there are other issues at an urban level that are right there as number 2, 3, 4, pretty close. Crime is still one of them. Education is another. Transportation is generally a third. Then there are a variety of other city services and key issues that come up. The budget deficit is there also, but not quite as critical, although that can change, obviously, depending on the time of year. But then we asked, in many of these cities, how you rated the mayor on the specific issues that matter most to the city. And by and large, what we find is the economy, it's a mixed bag, and no one's really getting particularly good marks on the economy or jobs right now, or even attracting business. How could they? We have 9% unemployment. The numbers haven't changed much. It hasn't gotten much better. But on the other hand, people also think that don't necessarily blame a mayor for the condition of the economy or jobs. They understand it's a much more complicated problem than that. On all the other issues save one, generally, mayors get good marks. Providing basic city services, dealing with transportation, education. Education is an area where I think there's an awful lot of feeling of importance. People want to see changes in the schools. They don't necessarily, and some mayors, including my client in Milwaukee, Tom Barrett, there was an attempt to sort of, let's have a mayoral, for lack of a better word, takeover. It may not be the right word, but it was how it's perceived by the public of the schools, because the schools are dysfunctional. The public is wary of that. Still think, well, that may be trading some independence for too much politics, but they still have confidence in their mayors trying to change things in terms of the schools. They get good marks. The only issue really where you all are receiving negative marks these days is the budget, for the specific reason that people aren't happy about any budget choices that people have to make, but it's not dragging your overall popularity down to the same degree that that's happening in a national or a state level. I used to think, why is this so? And I used to think that governor was the best job in America, at least in terms of public service. Think about it for a second, right? They get the troopers, they get the helicopter or the plane. Yeah, maybe they've got to wrangle. Some states it's only once every 2 years. They might have to wrangle in a legislative session on a budget for a few months. But other than that, they cut the ribbons, they go to the football games, they have their junkets to Asia or Europe and come back and say, look at what I'm doing to promote the economy, and it's a great gig, and they get reelected. Not so fast, my friend. Look at what's happened, and again, I'm trying not to put my partisan hat on. I mean, we have a governor, client of ours, who's struggling in this state. We had a Democratic governor in Minnesota who just had to deal with a shutdown of his state. That wasn't pretty. But a lot of these governors that whooshed into office, these Republicans, be careful what you wish for. Their popularity has cratered. Wisconsin's a great example, but it's Ohio, Florida, New Jersey. I mean, there's plenty of other states where they've come in and decided that they had a mandate, and the public took one look at what they did and decided they didn't like it very much. You all, on the other hand, why are mayors successful? It's local, it's tangible. The voters can see it, they can feel it, they can touch it. The very thing that may keep you up at night, it's a job that's 24/7, as Mayor Vigoroso, and that all of you know. I mean, the call can come at any point for any reason, and you're on call. Heaven forbid that you're out of the city when the flood happens, or the big snowfall and the plows didn't work, or whatever the issue happens to be. You know that it's something that people expect you to be right there and on top of it. But what comes with that, I think, is a generally more close connection that people have to local government. We still pass bond measures and tax increases at a local level consistently, even in California, when sometimes you have to get 60% of the vote or higher, and we still by and large win them. The public is still willing to say, I'm going to go ahead and support that, even as they go down in flames at a state level. There's a degree of confidence that people have in their local officials that simply doesn't exist at a different level. The other thing is, and this room is a great reflection of it, somebody made a reference to it earlier. You did, Mayor. Cities are America. And I say, in the new America, the America of the 21st century, the diversity that is clearly apparent in our country. When I look at this national debate, and again, I'm going to try to be kind here, but I see one very narrow group of people who've decided that one particular ideological stance is everything to them. It's the God and they'll really attack me for that. But I mean, it's essentially, this is what they are giving fealty to. This is what they worship. No taxes, no government, no spending, no taxes, no government, no spending. And they're divorced from most of the American people. And frankly, and my side, I have to say, at a national level, sometimes forgets who our constituents were. I think administration, I hate to say this, but John Podesta's not here anymore, but sometimes I think they believe that this 2011-2012 period is the same as 1995 and 1996. John Boehner's not Newt Gingrich. We created 5 million jobs, I think, in 95 and 96. They're not there right now. This is a different economy. I won't make the point about Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. To be sympathetic to President Obama, he's got a lot of problems on his plate, and they came before he got there, or got worse, not through his own fault. But I yet somehow believe that, if we can just strike a budget deal, if we can make Congress look bad, everything will be fine. It doesn't work that way. But they seem so cut off and so distant. You all are part of a vibrant community that's changing, that's complex. You have to represent it, you have to shape it, you have to respond to it. It's not simply that problems are local and we can deal with it. And the media, frankly, I know they may be a pain in the you-know-what for you all the time, but they cover you. A lot of the problem with the rest of the debate is it's simply either not covered or ignored for so long that the public really doesn't have much of a sense of it and the public turns off to it. The hot issue happens locally. People know about it. They're dealing with it. They understand it's front and center. When Mayor Villagrosa had to shut down, anybody who's lived in L.A., the notion that the 405 freeway is going to be shut between the valley and the west side of Los Angeles and all the traffic that's entailed there, Carmageddon was not an exaggeration. And yet, look what happened. The public said, okay. They acted not with their feet, they acted with their couch. They sat down and said, we're not going to go anywhere this weekend. We're not going to add to the problem. And you all got it done faster than anybody thought, and it was a great success. Could have been a disaster, but that's what happens at a local level, and you don't see it elsewhere. Our cities themselves, and I won't go through all the details, but what's striking to me is of our biggest 5 cities, every one of them in my lifetime, and I think 4 of the 5, I was actually involved in the campaigns that created first African-American mayors ever. Every one of those 5. Every one of those 5, at some point subsequently, the person who followed that first African-American mayor ever, in every case, was white. A couple of Republicans, Giuliani and Reardon, but interestingly enough, it was clearly a change. Better or worse, but it showed diversity right there. Now, every one of them since that time have gone either to, we have a Latino mayor of Los Angeles, we have an openly gay woman who's mayor of Houston, we now have African-American mayors who've come back in Philadelphia. One of them is sitting right here. We have Rahm. We have a diverse and ever-changing set of leaders in all these cities, and they represent the complexity of the cities themselves. It's not so simple. You guys have to be smarter politically. You have to adapt. Cities are changing in every which way. It used to be simply racial issues. When you think about the cities in the 60s and 70s, they were a place of decay, of racial conflict. They can't work. They were the example of what's wrong in this country. How far we've come since then. Do racial conflicts still exist? Sure. Are there still a lot of problems in major cities? Sure. But by and large, people have a very different feeling about them, and there's more success than failure these days. And I think, to get to the debate that we're all talking about now, in some ways, you guys are forced to get it done. The mayor just made a reference to me earlier. He said, the difference between this and the assembly, I love being speaker. But, the buck does stop right here. You get a budget, you've got to get it done. You have to figure out each side of the balance sheet and figure out how the city's going to continue in the future. And you got to make a bunch of tough decisions. The public doesn't always like all those decisions, but they do appreciate an overall sense of competence and confidence that they get from the jobs that you do. Now, here's the threat. These right direction numbers I referred to earlier, they are coming down a little bit. There's more danger out there right now. As I mentioned, the one places that you all are not perceived as doing a good job And I think it's primarily because how can anybody be doing a great job on the budget these days? It has to do with the budget and the deficits. And they understand they're tough choices, but they don't always like them. Things aren't going to get better very much anytime real soon, and we may have obvious implications of what happens at the federal level. You all are going to get pressed again. And you're going to have to, I think, give people a sense that there's a way out of this, that we're being fair and not overly harsh, that we're protecting some key elements. Obviously, they want to have police and fire be protected because the issues of safety and security and protection still matter an awful lot, but they also want to see some of the human programs that deal, whether it's healthcare or other child services, et cetera, also be helped. And they don't want to see the potholes in the roads and streets go to hell. So, it's a tough combination of things that you have to do, and they want to make sure the trash gets picked up and the snow gets plowed, and the normal set of requirements that you have in this job. And somewhere, they want to get back to work, which is the toughest thing of all. They don't blame you for it. You're the last people they're going to blame. They're going to go after big business or the president or the Congress or the state or federal government in general, and understand that you're at the end of the chain. I always thought that the show, though, and I don't think the mayor of Baltimore is here. No. Good. Because there's controversy. To me, The Wire it's fictional, but not. It is the greatest story of what big cities are really all about. Done extraordinarily well. But if you remember, those of you who ever saw that show, that when Carcetti finally wins, he finally gets there, and then is told what this job really entails, and I won't use the actual word, but essentially he knows that it's a bowl of something that he's going to have to deal with every day. And that's precisely what you all understand about your job. You got to deal with it every day. And you're going to have to get through it. And get through a very tough period of time right now, and you're going to be challenged. I think, though, this public still, if they think you're straight with them, you're square about it, that the burden is shared, and that there is a path to success, and they have an investment. They're still in these cities. I mean, think about this. For all the negatives that we know about, I'd simply point out, where are the celebrations? I mean, by the way, I think the best idea of how you could have confidence these days, just have a military parade in a big city, right? That would be the perfect marriage of institutions that we still think, by and large, work. But where are the celebrations? They occur in cities, not in the suburbs. Where do we build these arenas and stadiums? There are debates about them, whether we have the public money, et cetera. But where, there was a stretch of time when all of a sudden everyone said, forget the cities, we're going to build them out where the people are, out in some interstate highway, some intersection 15 miles, 20 miles out. It doesn't happen anymore. Bring it back downtown. Bring it back to the city. Where are the restaurants? Where's the neighborhood, the vibrant neighborhood life? Where's the diversity? A few years ago, I hadn't been in the lower part of Manhattan for I don't know how long. And I went there with my family and walked around and went, oh my goodness. This is the world. It's not just America. This is a global society, and here it is. You go anywhere in the Village or Soho or anywhere within about 5 or 6 blocks of lower Manhattan, and you see the entire world in front of you. That's the diversity that cities still have, and I think people still, no matter what our politics is and how jingoistic it gets, I think at some level people still basically believe in it. Ben Franklin said in Philadelphia 200 and some years ago, somebody came up and said, well, what happened? What do we have here, Mr. Franklin? He says, well, you have a republic if you can keep it. And I would argue that you all still have the confidence of the public, if you can keep it.
Before we entered in questions, you got an opportunity to hear from John and the back and forth. Clearly, mayors are very concerned about all of the wrangling, the dithering around the deficit and the debt, the implications, the lack of any voice on the issue of jobs and job creation. Share with us how mayors can and should shape this debate. What would be the most effective with respect to where the American people are right now in really helping to push the Congress and the White House to a resolution here that focuses on job creation and investments as well?
Well, I would simply say that you still have an ability to be real advocates at both the state and federal level. I come back to, you still have to square the circle. You've got to balance that budget. You have to get through each fiscal crisis that you're facing. That's still, the public doesn't want you to abdicate leadership, but they understand that you're in a unique position, that you didn't, you're at the end of the chain, and it wasn't created by you, but you also have a legitimate voice to speak out. And so I would simply say, I think there's if you get an example of a program that works and defend it, wonderful. But I think you've also got to advocate for people, and I think it's not only mayor at the federal level. I'm not sure. I'll put it this way: one side of the argument isn't going to listen to big cities by and large. It's not part of their calculation, not part of their ideology. But I think when you're at a state level, that is less true. There, I think you may have more impact and can have more impact in terms of who you're fighting for. But as I referred earlier, I mean, I'm a partisan Democrat, but I think our side needs to be bucked up here, to put it mildly. And they need to hear this voice from the president on down. So I still think that you have the very things that I've talked about, that you have the ability to command some media attention. You have a local media in almost every one of your cities that will cover what you say and do. It'll reverberate at least on a statewide level and occasionally also get to the federal government. Make noise, squawk. What's the downside right now? I think the public expects that from you. I mean, as I said, they're going to make sure that you get through the bottom line as well, but they expect you to stand up. There's no problem right now in being advocates and in chiding our national leaders for ignoring a problem like, I mean, unemployment is endemic, and you know better than anybody. When you hear the numbers John referred to, we're talking about 20 or 25% unemployment of people under 25, many of whom are urban and minority, many of whom are not. But that's stunning. And, you know, I would simply say, just get out there, be heard. What's the downside?
Mayor Soglin, Mayor Ortiz, Mayor Chen.
Paul, it was fun, and I'm glad it's over. You heard
within 1,000 votes, by the way, but he won.
I think I also want to mention that between us, we spent $500,000 total.
Never did a negative ad.
One negative ad.
Not one negative ad.
You heard our discussion earlier. For those of us who want to change what's going on in our state legislatures, and in the Congress, I'm convinced that we're not going to work one-on-one talking to them. We have to go to the common constituency. How do we articulate the message, which is, at the local level, we're hurting. We have already maxed out because of the push downward on our ability to raise taxes. But we expect the state, we expect the Congress to enhance revenues and to spend it wisely as we know best. How do we frame that message? What do we say to move this off dead center?
Well, I think there's a power in numbers, and one of the things I would maybe suggest is that in your various states, if the more that you can band together, obviously if you're mayor of Los Angeles, you have a voice, or mayor of Philadelphia, there's some big cities that have tremendous voices here, but a state like Wisconsin is a good example. If the mayors of Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, Wausau, et cetera, can somehow come together in some sort of joint effort to either pinpoint in a specific issue in Wisconsin, we got a bunch of them, and we have politics going on as we speak. We're going to have recall elections. I may be the only person in America, by the way, in a year that can say, yeah, I was involved in a recall election against one governor and then in a recall election against another governor. I mean, it's you see it all. But I think the more that you can band together, you're absolutely right. It's not going to happen one-on-one. They won't listen. You have to use it through the media or through some community action of some kind, and I would try to pinpoint the success or the places and not simply be, we're in deep trouble here, we're drowning, we're going under, which is maybe true, but also try to give people a little example of hope, something that worked, something that can work, something that they should be supporting more, at least so that there's a positive aspect to it. My ultimate answer to you, though, is I think, and this goes to the earlier question, I personally believe that none of this is going to get sorted out until a year from now in November. I think we are, and I hate to say that because it's risky, how we get through the next year and a half. But frankly, the election, unfortunately, was decisive enough in 2010 that the folks that won believe in their Kool-Aid, and until somebody, i.e. the voters, tell them otherwise, they're not going to get off of it. And I don't want to make this all partisan political, but I'm just giving you an honest answer. I don't think you're going to see substantial change in any way unless we get a tremendous lucky break with the economy, and that certainly doesn't seem to, I share John Podesta's skepticism about what the White House believes in terms of the financial markets and corporations getting a sense of security if there's a budget deal. I think the problem is in the other direction. The problem is there aren't people who can afford mortgages. There aren't people with jobs who are spending money. So my answer to you is that I think ultimately it's going to be a political judgment that starts us perhaps back on the right path. But in the meantime, I think you may have to simply get a power of numbers, use the media, use community groups, we had a very dramatic example, obviously, in Wisconsin, but that's one case where totally shocking me, and everything that we've kind of seen in our politics, which has been away from the grassroots for so many years. Consultants like me, unfortunately, are part of that process. Let's just raise money and spend it on television. Grassroots activism changed public minds. It didn't just create a media circus, it actually helped bring an issue to boil that caused people to say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? So it can be done.
Mayor Ortiz.
Thank you, Mr. President. Frank Ortiz again from Pembroke Pines, Florida. I loved your assessment of diversity. In the census now in Pembroke Pines, the Hispanic have gone up 60 to 66%. When he introduced me as Alcalde Ortiz, I say thank you. The quick question is, in Florida, we don't have a lot of industry. Now with the demise and the finishing of the shuttle program, most of our businesses are small businesses. And we're finding in our cities, particularly in Pembroke Pines, Oscar Goodman, a great former mayor, says a job's a job, what the government creates. How do we create jobs in a small business atmosphere when the banks won't loan, and we've had meetings here with the SBA and French, how do we as mayors create jobs if that market won't let us because the banks won't loan the money?
Yeah, I don't have an easy answer for you because you're absolutely right. If the credit's not there, how do you get the engine? How do you get people to take a chance on a business, which then hires people? It is a vicious cycle right now that we're in, and I wish I had an easy answer to you except to say you're asking the right question. And we know that small businesses, you all obviously need to chase, and you do, that big corporation. Some of you end up fighting over the same industry sometimes, or the same company, but you don't want the big corporation to leave. You want the big corporation to come. That's going to get the media attention, understandably, but most of the jobs ultimately are going to be from a smaller business, and they're going to be created on the basics. And I'm not an economist, and I'm not a job creator, so I don't have an easy answer for you. I think the banks have to be pressured more. Whether that succeeds or not, I don't know. That's another whole can of worms to get into about what we did or didn't do in terms of the financial crisis and how it ended up impacting our all I know is a whole lot of people still can't afford a mortgage. And how is that going to help our economy if they can't? Nevada's a classic example. What do you do in Las Vegas if you have all these homes that are still being foreclosed and you have a tourism industry which is just barely trying to get back on its feet? Where does the money come from? So, there's not an easy answer on jobs. As I said, I think you all can point to some examples of things that have worked in the past, or at least to try to bring people back and bring into relief some of the areas that can work and get people to start thinking about it again. Because if people, at some point, the light bulb better go off and people or go on, and people better start realizing that if we don't have people that can spend money, then how is any of this going to work out?
Mayor Chen?
Thank you, Mr. President. And I think that's a great segue for what I'm about to share with you. I represent a city of Cerritos, California, a population about 50,000. Our average income is about 100, just shy of 100,000. We have, in the 55 years of our history, we have actually used redevelopment to make our city into what it is today, economic power with $200 million in reserves. We have the world's largest auto mall. If you have not heard the Yes Cerritos commercial, that's us. But I wanted to share with you you talk about the national unemployment rate of 9%. The California far exceeds that. Our city is shy, just a little bit shy of 7% unemployment rate. So I think we've done a great job as an individual, very small city in relative to some of the largest city being represented here. The key issue is we can't change what's going on in Washington. Very little we can do in the state. But I think what we can do to get the message out to our leaders in DC is that to make it easier for people who want to spend money here in the United States. We have company who's willing to come to North America for development and go into partnership, private and public partnerships. But what we don't do is allow them to come. More recently, in the San Gabriel Valley, we had a real estate summit that was put to place last year. We had developers from China, from various parts of Asia, and who were able to hear and had a great exchange of possible development opportunities. This year, 30 of them did not receive the visas to be allowed to enter into this country to participate. And this is the kind of stuff that when you hear, if these individuals who are key decision makers can't even be here to make a decision as to what is available and what we're trying to put forth as to development opportunities, how are you going to get any kind of opportunities here? And so the question is, can we get the message out to our congressionals in DC and policies? Mr. Podesta talked about efficiency in the government, streamlining, using the leverage. All we want is just allow the individuals who can do business here and to make us to have the opportunity to create jobs. That's all we're asking for. Never mind about this major big changes that we as local mayors can't do and can't affect, but we can do if we bring them to here. How can we get that message out that bring the people here to the United States in order to spend their dollars so that we can create the jobs locally?
Just keep talking. I mean, the great thing you have is, you heard it in your case study and some of the other questions, is you're dealing with it on the ground level. And in human terms, with real successes or failures that can be measured. But you have a story to tell, and all I would say is that keep telling it. I mean, if you're doing ads in Cerritos, then that's a good thing. At least somebody is hearing that or getting some message. So that's all I can say is you've got a story to tell, and just figure out every way you can to tell it.
Mayor Cooper, and again, if you all could keep the questions as concise as possible. Mayor Cooper?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm curious, and I'm sorry it wasn't my question, but you perked my interest as far as what's your industry in your city?
We have major corporations as well as light industrials, and then we also have small businesses. And our auto mall, our performing arts center, and that brings in the business into the corporate, having the corporate image and the high rental opportunities. And then also we have two very, very successful retail shopping centers.
Great.
Thank you.
And then back to this question. I found, first of all, Mayor Cooper, Hallandale Beach, Florida. I'm also currently the president of Florida League of Cities. And two things, I think on the national and state level, it's really key that it's the art of distraction of really what the key issues are. And I think you've pointed out that we're really strong. We do our jobs on a daily basis. We balance our budgets and we work really hard. And I'm not saying, the deficit issue is critical. It is critical to the future. But in all this rhetoric, I can't agree with you more, is to continue to get the message out about the best practices and how we do that, to realign making sure our issues are there and how we're going to go about saying the reality is they're talking about the deficit. They're not talking about the banking industry. They're not talking about us being stalemated with the credit problems on a daily basis with housing. And the president, I think, was on the right direction. And now he's caught up in this deficit battle that's distracting all the good work that's taken place to move forward. I know in Florida, and I've seen it, and it's worked, in my city hall, getting that message out, the dialogue. We aren't state government and we are not federal government. We do what we have to do because our residents bringing that whole perspective into the city hall saying, oh gosh, are we going bankrupt and what's going to happen? And, really putting us at where we are, at that threshold that we're resolving. But I would encourage, what other messages there are to really focalize on our best practices, and it's really just to encourage. We as the Florida League actually put out commercials, and I'd encourage my colleagues, my mayors, we actually won an Emmy this year for commercials about city working and what we do on a daily basis, and saying, and they're at word, no words, just simple actions of what we do on a daily basis.
We have a few others.
Thanks.
Is there a question in there?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, other than it's working, how else can we get that word out?
You can get money for advertising. It's tight these days, obviously, but if you can get corporate money to help come in and actually produce some advertising, that's doesn't hurt. Doesn't hurt.
Actually, onto something. That's a great idea.
Thank you.
Mayor Bowser, and then I have Jen, and we only have a few more minutes. Jen, Goodman, and County. We'll end it there, but please, if you can keep it as short as possible, thank you. I want to get to all of you.
Right. Mayor Bowser from East Orange, New Jersey. I'm always curious because with all the recessions that we've had, it seems like we haven't learned anything from them. I was in an economic summit and they talked about this one is different because it has more global influences. But certainly we've learned something from it. And I get upset when we continually talk about job creation because mayors, presidents, legislators don't create one freaking job, period. What we do is provide opportunity. And it's known from recessions, the last thing to recover is jobs. Are we not focusing on the right thing at this time that we need to sort of refocus and retool or redo something? Question.
Well, I'll get into all I can talk about is the arena of public opinion. They were absolutely not just frustrated, but disconnected from this budget debate until very, very recently. For David Plouffe to say maybe unemployment won't be a big deal to the voters next year, well, he's not saying that without some degree of knowledge about what he thinks the playing field's going to be. Essentially, I think we have a calculation on both sides that, for different reasons, propels them toward a debate that a lot of the American people, the New York Times nailed it, I think, with the story, when was it, a few days ago on the front page, which said, the American people just don't get this debate. What is this? It seems so disconnected from their lives, even though, of course, it's an important issue, and the ramifications of failure are huge. All I can say is that the only way that the human concerns that have to do with jobs, lack thereof, and everything that stems from that come back into play is if people start to voice and talk about it. And I don't see anything prior to next fall doing that, to be honest with you. I just simply think that we're going to stagger along here for another year until people can start to force a question in front of the voting public to ultimately start to act. And if they're frustrated, And I'll be very blunt. The Republicans made a bet that worked for them in 2010. Essentially, bring him down. We don't care. He'll suffer. His party will suffer. We won't. Turned out to work. There may be a lot of folks over there who think the same thing about 2012. I'm just going to say it. And that they will be the beneficiary from a power standpoint, and to be fair, and then their ideological beliefs will have more chance to succeed. If they truly do believe that they have a better answer on how to turn this economy around, then we're going to find out if they're right or not. But I think we're in the midst of power politics, and I don't think it's going to change prior to the election next year, which will, maybe even that won't resolve it, but at least has a chance to resolve it.
Mayor Jin?
Thank you, Mr. President. And I guess dovetailing on that point, I'm curious about your opinion of beyond 2012 and the scenarios of what we are going to be dealing with in terms of Tea Partiers and so forth. I had a very interesting experience the past few months. I ran for Congress myself, actually, and the person that hired your firm actually won. So congratulations
we win a
to
few.
You. But, and so it teaches me a little bit about that. But what I found out there is just a lot of anger about the federal government, a lot of anger about the financial condition that we're in. And in a district that was 18% democratically favored, a Tea Party or Republican actually got into the runoff election. So, that person really had a significant amount of traction, yeah, and overshadows sort of the problem-solving issue, common sense tenor that we as mayors tend to promote. And so do you see beyond 2012 that the Tea Partiers and the more elements of that side of the Republican Party even growing greater in resonance, or will it depend on what happens to the president?
Yeah, it's hard enough for me to look 3 months in advance, but to get beyond a year, I think until they fail, they're going to be around. Maybe they'll fail, or maybe they'll partly fail, and we'll still have some other outcome. One of the dangers is the very people we're talking about who are most hurt by this economy are also the ones who may or may not turn out to vote next year, depending on what the level of frustration is. We had a president who was elected in large part because of new voters, many of whom were young. They stayed home in 2010. They're seeing a job market that isn't particularly strong right now. How are they going to act? We've had essentially a tie in this country in terms of partisan politics now for most of the last 2 decades. When either side thinks they've broken the tie, the public usually reminds them that they didn't, and that what they think they have a mandate to do, they don't. And that's scary, frankly. I'm not blaming the public. The public is reining in excess in whatever direction, but the scary thing is that we end up with dysfunction after dysfunction after dysfunction. So I can't sit here and say, listen, the best news I have for all of you is what I started with. But the word last remaining, those words I meant, because the confidence at the other levels of government doesn't exist. There is no foundation. For his success or failure, this president is not turned into either Bill Clinton or Ronald Reagan. Maybe he will one day. But as of this moment, he is not. The country hasn't turned and had things start to work out and gained an overall level of confidence that can help propel a lot of other things. It's just not there. We're sort of eating ourselves right now. The credit doesn't exist. The banks don't want a loan. The bond ratings are going to go down. The federal government doesn't have money. People don't have jobs. They don't buy houses, et cetera, et cetera.
And we got 2 more people, and that's it. Unfortunately, we do have a 12 o'clock press conference, and I want to keep us on task. So real quickly, Mayor Goodman, question. And Mayor
Carolyn Goodman, Las Vegas, Nevada. And thank heavens for Mayor Ginn to go with the Goodman. We got the attention of the president. Thank you very much. I will be very brief. All of us suffer from the exact same issues. This is nationwide. We know that. We are at a position, I believe, right now, where the attention being on the federal gridlock there, this body, this august body of leaders of the grassroots, can make even a stronger statement to our federal government and should come, and I ask you, what beyond, the banks are one for certain that's crippling our state as far as the mortgages and the foreclosures. What can we say additionally to what's on the platform? Because we are those who are dealing daily with the problems that they, in the lofty position, are not lending and throwing us any pennies to help our people get jobs and create jobs. So I am asking you, please, for some strength of what is the positive way as a body we can make a statement coming out of this meeting beyond just settle this.
Well, I almost talked to the two mayors about that, but except to say I think you can make a statement. You can stand up for yourselves, and I'll defer to you two.
Well, I'll let Mayor Nutter end this, but if, or maybe you could.
I'll do it. I think you have one more.
Let me have Mayor County first, and then.
Thank you, Frank County Mayor of Des Moines, Iowa. We get involved in some of the political process
Every now and then.
Early on. And my question to you is, we've spent the morning talking about unemployment, job loss, and lack of private sector lending and a myriad of other problems. It seems to me there's also a couple of opportunities, and I'd like your opinion on whether or not you think these are possibilities. Is there a possibility to reframe our solutions for the economy based upon certain sectors that are making record profits and essentially piling those dollars on the sidelines? They're not expanding their manufacturing, their capabilities. They're taking up to $10 billion plus and putting it on the sideline per quarter. And is there a possibility we can reframe, restructure certain tax codes to incent those people to invest in the future of their business in this economy and not make it so attractive to just make money and pile it up on a sideline?
Absolutely, but you're going to have a better chance of potential success at the state level than at the federal level. But I think that push it, absolutely. I think that's one of the great untold stories of what's happened in the last 2 or 3 years. Essentially, is where's the money gone? And if certain sectors, and I think I know the couple of the ones you're probably talking about, but if they're bankrolling those kinds of profits and the money isn't getting reinvested, then there ought to be some ability within the public sector to try to act on that. And I would probably try to push it. If you can do anything locally, great. But if you need legislation, see if you can push it on a state basis, and you may have more success, because you can, just as local government in general has more confidence and public has more confidence in it than they do state actually still has some more ability to shape things than the federal. Something is still tangible. If there's a corporation in Iowa or some other state that people know about and they know where their headquarters are and they know who their leaders are, then you can begin to try to change the debate that way. You have sort of a target at least that people can see. So I'd say yes, go.
Yeah, I'll be very short.
I would just like to say there are certain things in the federal tax code that seem to block some of that to happen. It's not just state.
I agree with you, but good luck changing it right now, unfortunately.
Mayor Nutter? Mayor Nutter?
Thank you, Mr. President. To fellow mayors, I've had a conversation with the President and Mayor Smith as well, and I think that the conversation from the morning now leading into this conversation, Mayor, good new mayor from Las Vegas, Goodman, I know.
Dynasty, same name.
I got it. I was trying to give you some build-up, Mayor. I wanted to lead into it. I think it causes a call of the question of what does this leadership conference, this leadership meeting do right now as the U.S. Conference of Mayors, again inserting ourselves, raising our voices, that there cannot be a legitimate discussion in Washington, D.C. about raising the debt ceiling limit, which is important, can be done tomorrow if they wanted to, that the deficit is an issue that must be dealt with, that they may not be able to figure out in the next couple of days because they haven't been able to over the last few weeks, but that the issue of jobs must be a part of this discussion. It's a three-part discussion: debt ceiling limit, deficit reduction, and jobs. I don't have, you don't have a year and a half to wait around till they figure out something after an election. I have a damn city to run, and we don't have time to be jerking around for another year and a half. We have unemployment just went up. It went up, and no one said a word about it. No one. And so I think that it is incumbent upon us at this meeting right now to take a stand, make our voices heard through our president, raise this debate in Washington, D.C., that if you want to talk about the debt ceiling limit, wonderful. That should be done right now. If you want to have a longer-term, legitimate, open discussion about spending cuts and revenues, great. But what are you going to do about jobs right now for the American people? That's what I want to know, and that's the question that's being raised. And I'm asking that through this conference, with the leadership of the President, that we make a public statement and a stand from the U.S. Conference of Mayors right now on this issue.
And in that vein, I think we have, I think, a real opportunity. I mentioned to the Times editorial board when we spoke to them, this was a body last year that took on one of the most controversial, polarizing, but important issues, the issue of comprehensive immigration reform. We had a very vigorous debate, but on consensus. What's it called when you do it automatically, when you put it by acclamation? We passed comprehensive immigration reform. Every mayor here has had to balance their budgets. We've had to make tough decisions. We've had to cut jobs, but we've also done it in a way that balances the need for revenues, the need for investments. We can distinguish at the local level between spending that actually has investments and dividends at the end of the rainbow and spending that we have to cut back. And we're in a time when the feds and the Congress doesn't have that ability. So I think it's critical that we hear Mayor Nutter on this issue and that all of us understand. When we took the position that we did with respect to the issue of Afghanistan, when we're taking the position on which was a jobs resolution, we ended that debate very clear. This was not a war resolution as much as it was a jobs resolution, and that the best way to honor our troops is to give them a job when they get home. And this is a real opportunity, I think, for us to weigh in a significant way. Since Baltimore, we all have had press conferences. We need to continue that. We all have tried to weigh in on the national talk shows, and we need to continue that. We can't let these people balance this budget in the way that will undermine our economy, set us back even further. And you saw those Metro Economy report where many of our cities, 75 cities, are going to have a lost decade. It's going to be 10 years before many of our cities are back to pre-recession employment levels. We could change that if we make investments in infrastructure. You heard Podesta talk about America Fast Forward, which both Democrats and Republicans are supporting now, but their money in the reauthorization is not nearly large enough. We can be another voice to that, and so we were hoping, as Mayor Nutter has said so ably, that we need to come out with a position. We're going to go walk out right now. We're going to have an opportunity to talk here to the LA press, but very importantly, an opportunity to go back to our cities and start to press the issues of jobs and investment in infrastructure, in transportation, in our ports and our airports. And to the extent that as an organization we move forward in that direction, maybe, just maybe, I know that they live in a bubble and they don't seem to be responding to what the majority of the people of this country want, but maybe we're going to have an impact on both parties about the need to stop dithering, the need to make investments. And so if we, if you would make a motion, Mr. Nutter.
Let him make the motion.
I would move that through this leadership meeting that the leadership of USCM communicate with the leaders of all four caucuses and the President of the United States of America that we are pressing, we are requesting that the jobs issue, that a job strategy become the third vital component to the debate that's going on in Washington right now. That the debt ceiling, yes, is very important. That dealing with the deficit long term is very important. But we have a number two, at least a number two issue right now, which is the issue of jobs, and that we are calling on the Congress and the President to take up those three issues simultaneously, obviously dealing with the debt ceiling limit first and foremost and as quickly as possible, to settle the markets, but to also point direction that we are trying to focus on jobs and all the different ways and ideas that have been laid out there about jobs, infrastructure bank, America Fast Forward. They got a billion ideas, just don't have seemingly the political will at the moment. But the motion is that the U.S. Conference of Mayors is insisting that the Congress and the President take up the issue as jobs, as important as debt ceiling limit and deficit reduction.
Seconded by Mr. Ortiz, and let me just say, I loved, the only friendly amendment I was going to make was demand. You said insist, that'll work. It has got to be a very strong statement that it's time to put America back to work. Thank you. Is there an aye vote here, or is this by acclamation? By acclamation?
By acclamation.
The ayes have it. Thank you very much.